The Hunter in the Shadows. Prologue. The Unseen Danger. Jacob Reynolds, a seasoned hiker, craved the solace of the Appalachian wilderness. His life in the city had become overwhelming, and the untouched beauty of nature offered a much-needed escape. With his trusty backpack, map, and compass, Jacob set off on what he intended to be a few days of peaceful backpacking through the dense forest. The first day was uneventful, the forest alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. As night began to fall, Jacob found a clearing and set up his tent, unaware of the unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Cabin. On the second day, Jacob ventured deeper into the wilderness. The trail became less defined, and the trees grew denser. As the sun began to set behind the towering peaks, he stumbled upon an old, weathered cabin nestled in a secluded hollow. The cabin looked abandoned, its wooden exterior worn by years of exposure to the elements. Seeking shelter for the night, Jacob decided to investigate. Inside, the cabin was sparsely furnished, with a rickety bed, a small table, and a fireplace that hadn't seen use in years. Despite its dilapidated state, it offered a reprieve from the biting cold. Jacob set up his sleeping bag, lit a small fire, and settled in for the night. As he drifted off to sleep, a sense of unease washed over him. The forest outside seemed unnaturally silent, the usual chorus of nocturnal creatures eerily absent. Ignoring the unsettling feeling, Jacob closed his eyes and hoped for a peaceful night's rest. Chapter 2. The Night of the Wolf. In the dead of night, Jacob was jolted awake by a low, menacing growl. His heart pounded as he peered out the window and saw a massive, shadowy figure lurking at the edge of the forest. It was a giant wolf, its eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. The creature circled the cabin, its growls growing louder and more menacing. Jacob's instincts kicked in, and he grabbed his hunting knife, clutching it tightly as he watched the wolf's every move. He knew that venturing outside would be suicide, so he barricaded the door with whatever furniture he could find. The wolf's relentless attacks on the cabin walls continued throughout the night, its powerful jaws gnashing at the wood. Jacob stayed vigilant, his heart racing with fear and adrenaline. As the first light of dawn began to break, the creature let out a final, thunderous howl and vanished into the forest. Exhausted and shaken, Jacob knew he couldn't stay in the cabin any longer. He packed his belongings and set out on the trail, hoping to put as much distance between himself and the monstrous wolf as possible. Chapter 3. The Faceless Pursuer. The next day, as Jacob trekked through the dense forest, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, set his nerves on edge. He kept a tight grip on his knife, ready to defend himself at a moment's notice. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Jacob's path led him to a clearing. There, standing ominously at the edge of the trees, was a tall, faceless man. The figure's featureless head and elongated limbs sent a chill down Jacob's spine. He took a cautious step back, but the faceless man mirrored his movements, silently stalking him. Panic surged through Jacob as he realized he was being hunted once again. He broke into a run, the faceless man pursuing him with unnerving speed. Jacob's breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted through the forest, his eyes scanning for any sign of escape. He stumbled upon a narrow ravine and, with no other options, leapt across. The faceless man stopped at the edge, unable to follow. Relieved but still wary, Jacob pressed on, determined to find a safe place to rest before nightfall. Chapter 4. The Siren of the Night. As night descended once more, Jacob found himself in another small clearing. He set up a makeshift camp. his back against a large rock for protection. Sleep came fitfully, his mind haunted by the events of the past 2 days. In the middle of the night, a soft, eerie singing drifted through the air. Jacob's eyes snapped open, and he saw a tall woman with long black hair covering her face standing at the edge of the clearing. Her voice was hypnotic, drawing him toward her despite the fear gripping his heart. He fought against the compulsion, trying to break free from the invisible force pulling him toward the woman. Her singing grew louder, more insistent, and Jacob realized he had to act quickly. He grabbed a handful of dirt and flung it at her, breaking the spell. The woman let out a piercing shriek and vanished into the night, leaving Jacob trembling and drenched in sweat. He knew he couldn't afford to let his guard down, not even for a moment. Chapter 5. The Shadow's Grasp. At dawn, Jacob resumed his journey, his mind racing with thoughts of the shape-shifting creature. He needed to reach civilization, to find help before it was too late. But the forest seemed to stretch on endlessly, and he began to lose hope. As the day wore on, Jacob noticed something strange. His shadow, which had always faithfully followed his movements, seemed to have a life of its own. It twisted and writhed, stretching into unnatural shapes that sent shivers down his spine. He quickened his pace, but the shadow stalked him relentlessly, mimicking his every move with sinister precision. It grew bolder, reaching out to grasp at his ankles, trying to trip him. Jacob stumbled, but managed to stay on his feet, driven by sheer determination. With the sun sinking low in the sky, Jacob spotted a narrow cave entrance hidden among the rocks. He darted inside, hoping the shadow wouldn't follow him into the darkness. For a moment, he thought he was safe, but then he saw it, his own shadow, creeping along the cave walls, closing in on him. Chapter 6. The final confrontation night fell, and Jacob's fear reached a fever pitch. He knew he was running out of time, that the creature would soon make its final move. As he huddled in the cave, he heard a bone-chilling growl echoing through the darkness. Emerging from the shadows was a grotesque amalgamation of the forms it had taken before. The giant wolf's body, the faceless man's limbs, and the tall woman's hair all combined into a nightmarish creature that defied logic. Jacob's heart raced as he faced the monstrosity. He knew he couldn't defeat it through sheer force. He had to outwit it. Drawing on his survival skills and the lessons he'd learned over the past few days, he devised a plan. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a flare, lighting it and tossing it at the creature. The blinding light caused it to recoil, buying Jacob precious seconds. He then grabbed a bundle of sticks and set them ablaze, creating a makeshift torch. With the creature momentarily stunned, Jacob made a run for the cave entrance. The amalgamation let out a deafening roar and gave chase, its many forms blending together in a terrifying display. As he sprinted through the forest, Jacob spotted a narrow gorge ahead. He knew it was his only chance. Summoning all his strength, he leaped across the gorge, landing on the other side just as the creature lunged for him. The amalgamation tumbled into the gorge, its roars of fury echoing through the night. Jacob watched as it struggled to climb out, but the steep walls proved too much for its twisted form. It let out one final blood-curdling scream before disappearing into the darkness below. Epilogue. The survivor's tale? Exhausted and battered, Jacob continued his journey through the Appalachian wilderness. The experience had left him scarred, both physically and mentally, but he had survived. He had outwitted the shape-shifting creature and lived to tell the tale. Days later, he stumbled upon a ranger station and collapsed at the doorstep. The rangers took him in, providing food, water, and medical attention. Jacob recounted his harrowing ordeal, though many found it hard to believe. Despite the skepticism, Jacob knew the truth. The creature was real, and it still lurked in the depths of the forest, waiting for its next victim. He vowed never to return to those haunted woods, but the memories would remain with him forever. And so, Jacob Reynolds emerged from the Appalachian wilderness, a survivor of a nightmare that defied explanation. The tale of his encounter with the shape-shifting creature became a legend, a warning to all who dared venture into the remote and unforgiving heart of the Appalachians.